All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are here in our fourth, or actually our fifth week of the South Fulton Mental Health Collaborative Facebook Live event. This series has been amazing so far. And it's hard to believe that we are here at this point at week five. And we have already just went so thoroughly through this series and had so many great speakers and different topics that have been just amazing. And thank you all, just parents and community, for reaching out to us, communicating with us, like what you all think is useful for you all and how you've enjoyed our series thus far. And so this week we have an amazing speaker that Elise is going to introduce, Dr. Green, where she's going to discuss coping skills and stress management. So again, I am Tedra Perkins, the Child and Adolescent Coordinator for Odyssey Family Counseling Center. And we have Elise.
Hi, everyone. It's Elise back again. Elise Payne. I am the school-based program coordinator at Odyssey Family Counseling Center. And I am really honored about having our guest here today. I got the pleasure of listening to her as a part of a panelist during a Black Lives Matter ethics training. And I really was inspired by her conversation with the other panelists. And so I got to connect with her, and I'm happy that Dr. Green is here with us today. So let me share with you a little bit about Dr. Green and the amazing work that she's done and how exciting it is to have her here. So I'm going to be looking at my notes. So as I'm working on this, so Dr. Green writes, speaks, and engages at the intersections of individual psychological distress and collective sociocultural oppression. As an Atlanta-based licensed clinical psychologist, Dr. Green is trained in trauma-informed care and delivering specialized trauma treatments to vulnerable populations, such as military veterans, Black women, and members of the LGBTQ community. She writes, leads workshops and trainings, asking clinicians to cultivate their own introspective practice and to approach care of clients with greater cultural humility. This is amazing. I'm so excited. The more I'm talking about, the more excited I am. As a foundation for her career, Dr. Green received a BA in English and Psychology from Georgetown University and her doctoral degree in Clinical and Community Psychology from Georgia State University. Woohoo, I'm from Georgia State too. She completed her internship and postdoctoral training, y'all, at Yale University, Department of Psychiatry in New Haven, Connecticut. She is the owner of her own practice, Standpoint Therapy and Organizational Consulting, the creator of Introspective Journal, which is a tool designed for therapists to deepen their self-awareness and improve their practice. She's also the co-founder of the newly formed Anti-Racism Clinician Collaborative. We are so excited to have you here, Dr. Green, and so honored that you would speak with us about coping skills and stress management. So I've posted all of her information to contact her also on our Facebook page. But Dr. Green, welcome to the South Fulton Mental Health Collaborative. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me, Elise and Tedra, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to the community who is here. I am doing well. I am busy, and I am doing well. Thank you for asking.
Well, we had some questions that our community members asked. As you know, right now, I think stress is the easiest word to use to describe kind of the current climate. There's just stress in all these different avenues. So, what do you talk about with your clients or with the community as it relates to stress and what our community is going through?
I really appreciate that you said stress is the easiest word to use because it reminds us that stress can actually be a catch-all term. Sometimes when we say I'm feeling stressed, what we might really mean is I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling confused, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling depressed. And so one of the things that's important to remember about stress is that stress is connected to some emotional experience that we're having. And it's important to check in with ourselves to see what that emotional experience is. And it may be that we're feeling different emotions at the same time and being pulled in different directions, which can cause, right, that feeling of stress or that feeling of stretching. And so once we start to investigate and explore that in ourselves, it'll give us some more information about how to handle stress. Stress is also something that we often talk about in a negative way, but stress in and of itself can actually be neutral. It depends on the context in which it's happening. I can feel stressed about the birth of a child or a new relationship or transitioning to a job I really care about, in the same way that I can also feel stressed about not having enough financial resources, for example, or stressed by the onslaught of, I would say, traumatic events that we're experiencing, right,
Yes.
in our social and political climate.
Yes.
So stress in and of itself, it really depends on what's surrounding the stress, whether or not we see it as negative or positive. To that
Mm.
end, stress really occurs and goes into the negative when the demands on us exceed our resources. So if someone is asking me to have lunch with them on a day where I don't really have anything scheduled and I'm kind of taking my time, that's not stressful. But if someone says, "Hey, Dr. Green, can you have lunch with me at 12 o'clock, in the middle of a Monday, and I'm scheduled from 7 a.m. until 11:59, and then I'm scheduled, from 1:05 until 6, that event is stressful. So the event itself isn't stressful on its own, but because I don't at that time have the resources to meet the demands, then it becomes stressful. So I think it's also important for us to recognize, do I have what it takes to follow through in this thing that I've said yes to, for example, right? Or am I saying yes because I'm used to saying yes, which makes me think about boundaries and how we have to think about if our boundaries are too loose. Are we saying yes because that's what we expect other people expect of us, right? Or that's what we're used to doing? Or are our boundaries too tight, where we are taking on responsibility that maybe we can delegate, right? That maybe we don't have to take on. So, I can kind of talk forever about this, but those are some points that I wanted to really have us think about as we have this conversation and as the community has this conversation about stress.
Yeah,
So
sorry, Tedra. I wanted to remind everybody who's watching, we've got some people watching live. I can see if you guys have any questions or comments as we're discussing, please put it in the comment section and we'll make sure to bring it up with Dr. Green. Go ahead, Tedra. What are you going to say?
No, you're fine. You're fine. Definitely, yes. Please comment because this is your time. So we definitely want to hear things that you all feel are important. And so, Dr. Green, you were mentioning about being able to connect with yourself and acknowledge like when you're stressed. What are some ways you think that could be helpful for families in connecting and acknowledging that stress? Because oftentimes we're like, oh, I feel stressed and I feel this way, but we don't take the time to really process it and how getting to that deeper root that you were discussing of you say stressed, but really underneath that umbrella is the sadness and feeling overwhelmed and feeling frustrated. So, what are some ways you think could be helpful to connect with those feelings?
So, one of the things to remember is stress is kind of like a low level fight or flight response, right? The brain kind of thinks that a threat is happening. And so we kind of go into a survival mode, and that is fine for a short period of time. The brain is designed to be in survival mode for the duration of a crisis, but then the crisis is supposed to end. And then we are supposed to return to baseline. So if we do not connect with what is stressful for us, what is worrying us, what is depressing us, what feels taxing, then we run the risk of continually being in this state of survival, which actually has long-term effects, not only on our brains, but also on our bodies. So the very first thing that I would suggest is to slow down for a moment and to just kind of check in and say, like, how am I doing? And even if you have to ask yourself out loud, right? Sometimes my patients make fun of me because I'll say, like, you can talk to yourself. That's perfectly
Yes.
fine. And so being able to really check in and say, what's going on for me? And then starting to notice, what are the ways in which I am being pulled in different directions, and maybe writing those things down so that you have kind of a really good visual of the different things that are on your plate. And then you might ask yourself, do I have to take on all of this responsibility, or is there someplace else that I can delegate this? Or even if I can't delegate it, is there a place where I can get support or help around kind of managing the things that I'm managing, especially in this climate when families are trying to adjust to figuring out what children are doing with school or not doing with school and how much ambiguity there is. This climate is a recipe for feeling overwhelmed and really for feeling unable to manage everything. So I do want to just kind of let people know that if you're feeling overwhelmed, like that's actually really normal right now,
Mhm.
because I think most of us are feeling overwhelmed. So we have to slow down. We have to check in. We have to see what our tasks are, prioritize. We have to seek support where we can. I also would suggest disconnecting sometimes. That
Yes.
we have to turn off our social media, we have to turn off the news, we have to turn off Netflix, and we have to kind of get outside, get into our own minds,
Mhm.
listen to ourselves, and kind of drown out some of the noise, because all of that noise can also start to interfere with us being able to hear what we need.
Yes.
Mm. We
And
have a comment,
mhm,
a question already, which I think was going really hand in hand with what you touched
mhm.
on already, Dr. Green. One of our commenters said, can you address techniques about addressing this stress with kids starting to go back to school? So in Fulton County schools, phase one, which is the first beginning of students coming back into the school, is supposed to start on September 8th, which is after Labor Day. So she is really asking about, to help both parents and kids, because this is like a new additional stressor. We're living in this climate, we're kind of holding a lot of stress and a lot of these feelings, but now we're heading into an even new thing that's coming up here next week. So she is asking for some techniques to address stress for kids and parents.
So I would be honest with kids about the ambiguity and how overwhelming that it can be. I think sometimes as parents, you may feel like you have to have all of the answers and you have to have everything figured out. And this is an unprecedented situation for, I would say, all of us. And
Mhm.
so there are a lot of things that aren't figured out. And so I would be honest about not knowing what's going to happen. I would also be clear about being there, right? So even though I don't know what's going to happen, we're going to figure it out and we're going to kind of get through it together.
Mm.
I would ask that the child is open with me and communicates their fears, their worries, their levels of overwhelm, and let them know that I'm available to listen and to help them problem solve. Um, and so I would also probably kind of plan moments that aren't about thinking about school and kind of dealing with the adjustment, and are just about connection and fun. And of course, those moments don't have to cost anything. They can be quite simple,
Mhm.
but really kind of thinking about how you can really solidify the relationship, because that's what's going to carry all of us through, I think,
Mhm.
these moments. And I know that y'all are often talking to kind of parents and kids.
Mhm.
What do you think?
I've really found that one of the best techniques for families during any times of stress, but most especially right now, is helping each other name the feelings. What you
Yes.
described as,
Mhm.
it's very difficult to name what's going on sometimes. It can be really hard to differentiate. Am I mad and sad? Am I, everything? And then sometimes mad and sad doesn't cover it. And really it's
Mhm.
frustrated and disappointed. You kind of have to learn more developed ways of communicating the emotions. And so
Mhm.
there's a really cool technique that you can Google it, called the feelings wheel. And in
Mhm.
the middle, I'm sure you've seen it, Dr. Green. In the middle, it's got kind of 5 or 6 very basic words for feelings, so like sad, mad, disgust, I think. So it's got some of those in the middle. And then as you move out of the feelings wheel, there are more differentiated feelings that are a little bit more specific. And sometimes you can start at, I just know I feel sad, but then you can follow the feelings wheel out to a more specific feeling that really resonates better. That's like, oh yeah, that's really it. I'm really disappointed, or I'm really, really just anxious or nervous, or, something like that. And teaching kids those words, they like to know new words, most of the kids that we work with. And so teaching them and helping model it, like as an adult, I need to be modeling that for children, that sometimes I get disappointed and anxious and
Mhm.
upset, and it's okay to name it or say, I'm having a hard time figuring it out. Let's figure it out together.
Mhm.
That's some stuff that I've done. What do you think, Tedra?
Mhm. I definitely agree. And as well as what you were saying, Dr. Green, about being open and honest.
Mhm.
This is a lot of people, like sometimes we get to the point where we don't want to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Open and honest puts you in a place of vulnerability to where you have to say, you know what, I have to let down that guard and be open with children, because even though we're like, oh, I have to be strong and I have to have all of the answers, being open and honest and saying, you know what? Hey, I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to have an open floor for us all to try to navigate and us all to think of ways that how we can manage through this together. How can we continue to thrive? Because that you want to continue to just thrive through it. And so I think definitely having that space of saying, okay, let's talk about it. Let's do some different things. If we need to process it every day, different times throughout the day, I am here. I am open and honest with you. You're open and honest with me. Let's process these things. Let's work it out. It's okay. We can do this together. We're in this together. Let's work it out. I don't have the answers. You don't have the answers, and it's okay. It doesn't make you less of a parent to not know the answers. It actually helps to where children are like, oh, okay, they're human too. They're just like me. Like they don't know the answers either, and it's okay. I really think just being vulnerable, being very vulnerable and saying, you know what, it is okay. We don't know, but it's okay. But we're going to continue to work to get through this.
Yeah. And so I really appreciate that. I think that is sometimes very difficult for us as adults to do, to be vulnerable with children, but also just to be vulnerable with one another and vulnerable, with ourselves. And so, Elise, I appreciate you introducing the feelings wheel as a way that we can give tools to children. I only work with adults and I use the feeling wheel all the time. Because even as adults, we don't always have the language to describe what we're feeling. And many times we may get used to saying, well, I'm fine, or I'm stressed, or I'm tired. Tired is something I hear so often. And all of those are catch-all phrases that don't really get to what the underlying emotions are. And so while I absolutely think that that is a tool for children, that is absolutely a tool also for us.
Yes. And having those times to where I like to call it just your quiet time. Having quiet time throughout the day. If you're doing virtual learning all day long, so now we need a quiet time. We need time to just step away to say, you know what? This is time we're going to read. This is the time we're going to engage in something fun. Even taking a nap. Naps are for everyone. I want to mention, like, naps are for everyone. They're not just for children. Naps help to just re-energize your brain and just reboot you. Even if it's 15 minutes, it's like 15 minutes to where you can just say, okay, let me just breathe. Even if you're resting, let me just rest to get my mind off of virtual school, off of working from home, off of the stressors. I am just taking 15 minutes to say, okay, you know what, body, I am here for you. Let's just take a moment so that we can just, all right, we're starting it over. And so it's like your computer. Your computer has a reboot time. Your computer's working around the clock. It's doing things. And then it says, you know what? All right, I'm going to sleep. Or we're going to reboot. And when it reboots, you see how it works just differently than it did before. So it's like our bodies need that as well. Take time throughout the day. Carve out some time to say, hey, this is just quiet time. Whatever looks right, because it looks different for everyone. Some people, it's like, okay, I have 15 minutes. I can do it. Others, it's like, okay, I may have like an hour that we can carve out and we can do that. But find the time that works well for you so that you can just say, all right, whew, okay, I'm ready. We're ready to do this again. We're ready.
So I really like the distinction, right, between rest and sleep, because we don't have to sleep in order to have a sense of rest. And if we don't have a lot of time, right, if I have 5 minutes between one thing and another, that's not enough time for me to get a good nap in, but it actually might be a chance for me to get some rest. And so one of the things, that people are talking a lot about these days is mindfulness. And although mindfulness is a very ancient concept, I think its introduction into so many different areas of our lives is fairly new. And so there are a lot of apps that exist, some of which you have to pay for, but some of which are free that you can kind of download to your phone, and you can kind of set a timer, like for 1 minute, for 2 minutes, for 5 minutes, I'm going to do some deep breathing, or I'm going to listen to some meditative music, or I'm going to do something that while it involves technology, it doesn't involve my engagement with
Yes.
technology, right? Like in the same way that looking through my Twitter feed might.
Mm-hmm.
And so it allows you to have some guided rest that is not also sleep. So I think kind of making that distinction can also be helpful. And also get outside. I
Yes.
really always stress getting outside because vitamin D from the sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need that. And movement is an quintessential way to deal with the emotions that we carry. Our emotions also live in our bodies. And so when we're able to take a walk, when we're able to ride a bike, when we're able to run around, it gives our hormones someplace to
Mm-hmm.
go, right?
Yes.
And so movement is a very important part of overall health and well-being. And by movement, I don't say you need to go to the gym, right, and have this intense workout. It really is moving your body, getting your heart rate up, getting a little sweat in. And if you could do it for 30 minutes a day, every day, that'd be great. But if you can only do it a couple of times a week, fine.
Yes.
Yeah, so I hear us talking about basically just different types of coping skills. So we've talked about what stress and managing the stress, so helping talk about it with the people that we love and kind of trying to identify the feelings beyond just stress. Like we know we just feel stressed, but the feelings that are coming up with that. And so we've started identifying some coping skills. So the resting, taking intentional time away, some meditation, and mindfulness apps. So I know for sure a few, and I just want to let people know some of them are, Headspace, Calm, CALM. There's also one called Calmcast. So Calm, CALM cast, play on the internet provider, and there are several other ones. I think there's one. Tetra, what's the other one that we've talked about before on here? I can't remember right now. But
Those are the main ones. Yeah.
yeah, if you guys have other ones that work for you, put it in the comments so that people who,
Yes.
are watching, like we're a community and this is a collaborative, which means everybody who's watching has the same amount of power, information, and engagement as us. So we want you to share what works for you and the things that have happened for you. I've talked with several teachers because obviously I'm the school-based program coordinator. So a lot of my work is with the teachers and school staff. And we've talked about you might have picked up a coping skill early on during the pandemic, right? You might have, maybe when this all started, you were somebody who decided to be very mindful of rest and you were able to just decompress and you were able to capitalize on that. Maybe you were someone who got really active. Maybe you were a baker. We saw all the people baking online,
Yes.
or maybe you were reading or, picking up some other hobbies, and those things might not be serving you in the same way that they did at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're 6 months in. So try something different. Talk to a friend, and maybe they were a baker and they're done with the baking piece, and you were a reader and you found a couple books you really liked, and swap. You bring over your baking pans and the yeast and the flour, and then you bring them your books, and you guys can trade. And then that's connecting together and building that sense of community. So any ideas that anybody else has who's watching, please comment in the chat so other people can also, thrive on the experience that we all share and bring together. The knowledge you have is just as vital and important as the knowledge that we share as people who work specifically in the mental health community. So I think another thing that is really important is the differentiation, or the difference between coping skills that are positive and coping skills that are negative. I think that we all have things that we do to cope, and some of them might be really good for us and some of them not so good for us. I could own mine, that sugar is something that keeps me moving through the day, and that caffeine. And it is hard to not, partake in sweets or soda or whatever to help me feel better because I'm stressed or going through stuff. So Dr. Green, what do you think about the use of coping skills and kind of how some coping skills can be better than others?
So I love that you mentioned food, because sometimes I actually think our behaviors can be places of wisdom that help us understand how we're doing. I may not know how I'm feeling, but if I'm having 2 and 3 and 4 cups of coffee, in a day, when normally I might just have one, that behavior is letting me know
Yes.
something. And I too am a sugar culprit. I love gummy bears and all things gummy. And so one of the things that I will notice is if I have a really busy day and I have a lot of sugar kind of in between, sometimes what that is me trying to deal with kind of the emotional taxing that comes right from our work. And so that is a coping skill that in the short term might work for me, but in the long term doesn't. Because eventually, when all that sugar builds up, I actually end up crashing and feeling terrible
Yes.
at the end of the day. So there are many things like that. Shopping is one of them. Even while many of us are not going into stores, online shopping, in 3 clicks, you can have an Amazon box just waiting for you. So habits like eating, overeating, or sometimes under eating, going a full day and not taking care of yourself in that way can be just as harmful as eating more than you need to, or eating the kinds of things that in the moment feel good for you, but in the longer term have health consequences like diabetes and high blood pressure, for example. Also, engaging and overindulging in using substances, alcohol, marijuana use, misusing prescription medications, and other kinds of substances that are out there. I know that some people have noticed changes in how they use substances as many of our jobs have gone online. And so for many folks, there's been an increase. So that's a thing to pay attention to, this change that in the long run can actually cause more harm than good.
Yeah, I think that's so important. We talk a lot about in the counseling world. They talk a lot about moderation and balance and trying to find it. And I know that early on in my own journey for myself, that when people would say things like self-care and finding balance, I would kind of eye roll like, okay, well, when I'm done with school, when I'm done with trying to get a job so that I can pay my bills, like, and all the other things that life has to offer, like, I'll get to my balance later. Like, I don't have time for balance when I'm hustling and trying to move forward. And so what do you recommend for people kind of in that mindset of like, I've got 3 kids, they're all at different schools. We're possibly going back in person starting the 8th, but that's phase 1. And we don't really know what the next phases are going to look like exactly and what order, all of this is going to happen. I don't have time for the self-care, or I don't, when you say self-care, it actually brings up an anger reaction. I get that a lot. Sometimes people are like, if someone says self-care to me one more time, I'm going to lose it, So what do you think for people who might be in that kind of mode? Like, I'm beyond, I can't even get there.
So one, self-care happens on several levels. It isn't just getting manicures and pedicures and getting your hair done, right? Self-care is also about drinking enough water during the day, which doesn't take a lot of time. Self-care is also about making sure you take that quiet time that Tedra was talking about, which also doesn't take a lot of time. Self-care is about making sure you're getting restful sleep. So a lot of people watch television before they go to bed. They have the television kind of in the bedroom. One of the things that I suggest to my folks who are having trouble sleeping is to turn the TV off, and if you can, to move the TV out of the room entirely, so that you have a space in your house that is really designated for rest and relaxation. So that doesn't take a lot of time. So really thinking about what are the small changes that you can begin to make in your life that can really end up having big effects. If you are eating sugar every day, like at times I have, reducing that to once a week instead, replacing that with kind of fruit instead. And also, I think about kind of the example of when you're on a plane. Whenever you're on the plane, in the beginning, the flight attendant stands up and says, if we lose cabin pressure, the masks are going to drop. And even if you're sitting next to a child, the very first thing that you're supposed to do is put the mask on yourself. And then you can put the mask on the child. Because if we are drowning, if we are suffocating, if we are so overwhelmed that we can't function, we are not at our best for the other people in our lives that we're taking care of. So even if we have 3 kids and we're managing school and we're doing all these things, not taking care of ourselves ultimately means not being able to take care of the other responsibilities we have as well as we can.
And I think we see, I know that we do, I think, Tedra, we see where the lack of self-care or being able to find some balance or little places that we can add in can sometimes add up to like long-term consequences for our mental health. So I'd like for us to kind of talk about, we're almost to the end of we're really past 12:30, but we're talking about some really great stuff. And I know that people have asked about these things. What are kind of the consequences of our mental health when we do put it on the back burner or don't address the need for balance and for those self-care strategies?
So I can definitely talk about this. I feel like I've been talking a lot. Tedra, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, it's like definitely I think putting self-care and your mental health on the back burner, that's where we're like a boiling pot. And so you have the water on the stove and it's boiling, boiling, boiling. And basically you're stuffing those emotions, you're stuffing processing things. You're saying, I'm piling everything on top of each other. And eventually it gets to a point where it overflows.
Mhm.
And it's now it feels out of control. It feels like, now how do I clean all of this up? How do I get all of this together? Because we've so long just said, I'll deal with it later. I'll deal with it. I don't have time for it right now. But then eventually it has to go somewhere. And so that's how not having self-care can affect our mental health, because then we say, okay, now I have no choice but to deal with it because I feel completely out of control. And now
It becomes a crisis.
yes, it gets to that point. And so it's just like, okay, if you try to do just piece by piece, it doesn't have to be something to where it's major, but it's like how we tell parents oftentimes, it's like taking baby steps. You just take baby steps to continue to help with your mental health. And knowing that self-care does not mean that you're selfish.
Right.
Oftentimes it's like, well, if I'm worried about myself and I'm not worried about my children, then does that not make me a good parent? Does that make me to where I'm selfish? And it's like, no, it actually makes you an even better parent than you already are, because you're already a great parent because you're thinking about your child and you're thinking about these things and you're putting these things into perspective. But now it's like it adds more tools to your toolbox.
It
It puts
does.
you in a position to say, now I have more power. Now I'm teaching my children even how to have self-care, because they're children now, but they'll be adults. As
Mhm.
teaches them, it mirrors that behavior for them to say, hey, I am taking time for self-care. So now when you're having a moment and you're frustrated and school isn't going the way you would like for school to go, or your friends are something happens in your peer group, this is how you can handle those times. This is how you can manage. And so it's like really making sure that you take baby steps, taking baby steps to help with your self-care. Like Dr. Green was saying, little steps each day, adding more water into your daily just habit, just having more fruits and vegetables, and really seeing how, even though we think like, oh, water doesn't have flavor, this is horrible, but your body, when it has water, it's a new energy that comes into yourself. It's just like, wow, I have a lot more energy. I don't feel as tired anymore. I feel a little bit more motivated.
Mhm.
How I can keep going. And so it's helpful, but definitely continue to work on it bit by bit every day so you don't become that pot of water that overflows.
Mm.
Absolutely. And when you talk about the pot of water overflowing, one of the things that I think about immediately is how that shows up in our relationships. That the overflowing isn't just happening kind of in the air, but we're overflowing onto our kids, or we're overflowing
Yes.
onto our partners, or we're overflowing onto our friends, or we're overflowing at work. And so all of this kind of pent up emotion becomes misdirected. And so other
Yes.
people end up in some ways suffering the consequences of our stress. And then that can disrupt the relationships that we need to
Mhm.
help us have the support that we need to get through these stressful moments. And so when we are dealing with our own mental health, of course, it's not just us, because we are a community. And so we're interdependent, which means what happens with me impacts what's happening with the people around me. So I also like to add that
Mhm.
lens, that when that pot boils over, it's going to boil over on someone.
Yes.
Yes, I think so. One of our commenters is saying, first we had a couple people talk about Headspace and Calm, so those apps, so people check those out. But also, Don said, if we don't make the choice now, we won't have a choice later. And I think
Yeah.
that's really impactful. You know, what it is going to the lasting effects will be there and cause more stress. You know, it
Mhm.
will continue to be a concern. And I think, you know, this is another topic for another time. But the effects of that long-term stress and why we kind of live through that and keep holding on to that stress is an important thing to be looking at. I wish we could talk forever because we are really, I think, talking about a lot of great things that our community is really interested in. And these parents and other community members have chosen topics that they like to hear about. And this was one that several people, you know, identified as being a place that they need support. And so we just want to remind everybody that on our Facebook page, Dr. Green, all of your information is there. Not only your bio and your photo for people, but also you know, the website for your practice and your Instagram handle, as well as how someone can contact you through Psychology Today if they choose. So if you guys are interested and you've really enjoyed talking with Dr. Green like we have and learning from her, please check out her practice and support her. She's one of her practices, I believe, is in East Point, right? You're here on the south end of Atlanta as well.
Well, now I'm mostly virtual, so I am
Almost, that's true.
accessible anywhere.
Yes.
There we go.
We just love to shout out when we're in South Fulton because we love
Yes.
our people who are here in this community. So this is truly connected. All the speakers that we've had are connected to this community because we need people who understand where our community is and all the varied and wonderful aspects of what it means to be here on the south side of Atlanta and in South Fulton County. So I want to also remind people that Tedra and I, we work for the nonprofit agency Odyssey Family Counseling Center.
Yes.
And our goal and our mission is to support people in this area with mental health needs. We see everybody starting at the age of 4 all the way up. We'll take you. We have programs for children, adolescents, school-based mental health. We have substance use programs. We have programs related to individuals living with HIV or who are LGBTQ plus community. We have individuals that we work with at the Center for Black Women's Wellness and the court program. So we pretty much, if you're out there and listening to us, we have programs that can be supportive
Yes.
to you. If you or someone you know is struggling or just would like to talk about some of these things. I mean, figuring out what works for you, coping and stress management wise. Sometimes you just need someone to talk through that, and our clinicians are available to do that kind of stuff with you. So please check out Odyssey Family Counseling Center. Please check out Dr. Green and see more about her page. Let me tell you, her website is exquisite. Tedra and I were
Yes.
looking at it yesterday.
The first page, I mean, it's calming once you already just go to the home screen.
That's what I was going to say. If you just need a moment, you can just pull up her page and watch the oceans crash on the shore,
Yes.
the waves crash on the shore, and feel connected and grounded for a moment. So please check out her stuff. We want to support and honor the amazing gift that we have of Dr. Green being
Yes.
here with us today, volunteering her time.
Thank you so much.
And we welcome you to come back whenever you want. And you are always a part of our collaborative community. And we
Yes.
are excited to partner with you on the other projects that you are working on. So thank you so, so much, Dr. Green. And oh, yes. Sorry. Somebody commented and asked for the contact information. We will share the contact information. Yes, I will do that. Sorry, I'm reading the comment. I want to make sure I address it. And if somebody you know is maybe in a crisis moment, we want to remind people that if there's a threat, someone's struggling with feeling very upset and talking about maybe harming themselves or others, please don't hesitate. Call 911. You can also call the Georgia Crisis and Access line at 1-800-715-4225. That's 24/7 available to help if someone is in crisis. And so please utilize that service. There's also some on the Georgia and other organizations have different COVID-19 emotional support lines. So I'm going to post those and make sure I connect with that in case you have gotten to the point where the POTS boiled over and you're really needing help immediately. So please don't hesitate to do that, and make sure that other people in the community know that too. I want to leave, if you guys have any other parting things to send our community off with, Tedra, Dr. Green, would you like to add any last additional comments before we say goodbye?
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, community, for being here. A quote that I really appreciate: listen to your body when it whispers, so you won't have to hear it scream.
Wow. Yes.
That is
Thank you
great.
so much.
I am not even ending with anything else after that quote right there. I'm like, you know what? Listen, that's what we need to do. That was a great quote. Definitely listening to our bodies when it whispers. Thank you so much, Dr. Green. Thank you. You are now, like Elisa has said, you are now a part of the South Fulton Mental Health Collaborative family.
Hey.
You are in, and we have welcomed you. So thank you so much for everything that you've done for the community. Thank you so much for coming to speak to the community and just really being here, just being a word for us. So thank you so much. And everyone else, please look forward to the last part of our series. We may come back though, but the last part of our series next week at 12 o'clock again. Please continue to submit your questions. Please continue to comment and any questions that you may have to Dr. Green, because we can email those to her. And so please continue to do those things. Thank you so much for your support. And this was definitely a collaborative that the parents of South Fulton have requested, and we came and made sure that we are doing this for the community. So thank you so much, everyone. And anything else, Elise?
No, well, I did just realize I didn't tease next week. We've got to tease who we've got next week. We got another great speaker. Next week, we are excited to welcome Dr. Patrice Harris, who's an Atlanta-based psychiatrist and, Tedra, get this, I know you know, but I'm going to say it like you don't know, the immediate past president of the American Medical Association. She's the first African-American woman who was elected as the head of the AMA. So she has been traveling the country and the world talking about mental health and talking about the impact of mental health and equity and trauma on our physical health and well-being in the community. So we are so honored that she is going to spend some time with us next week talking about trauma, mental health, and equity in our community and the roadmap for the future. So please check us out next week too, because Dr. Harris it's something you don't want to miss. And if you have any questions already for Dr. Harris, go ahead and put in the comments and we'll be bringing those together for next week. All right, that's for sure the end of our conversation today. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week here, Facebook Live at 12 p.m. Goodbye.
Bye.